A lot of people in marriages perhaps wish that their spouse would reach for repair of the relationship as readily as they reach for repair of their car or their computer, but they don't because it's confronting, it's personal.
Welcome to Power With, conversations for people doing the work of social change from the inside out. I am T.Anderson. My guest today is Jill Nagle, founder of Mendful, 20 years in nonviolent communication, a career in tech, and a vision for making repair as reachable as your phone. Here's my conversation with Jill. Question I had is something about the 20 years of NVC experience, the author that you are, the founder that you are of Wisdom of the Body, all the UX, user experience design and content design in tech, and now Mendful. So yeah, I'm curious how all that weaves together for you.
To me, it seems the living in it, it feels like a logical and intuitive and been embodied outgrowths of all of that you've mentioned. I can speak to some of the turning points for me along the way that contributed to this. One of them started when I was 8, and I picked up the book Between Parent and Child off of my parents' bookshelves, and I saw this reflective model of dialogue. There are all these vignettes of parents listening to children, reflecting back. Well, I hear you were really angry about that. Tell me more. What was that like for you? And it's just, nobody talked to me like that. And the possibility of being heard and held and seen like that just awakened something in me. And I was quite excited. And I ran to my father and I showed him what I was reading, and I tried to teach him how to talk to me. This did not go over very well. He said, Gnat has no kids, which I later found out is not true. Chaim Gnat does indeed have children. As I grew, I often became the go-to person for people around me. Sometimes even people older than me, like camp counselors. It was overwhelming and it was disturbing. So I shut that down, and I didn't want to have a career so much doing that for a living. But I still was very curious. I got what I will later call externally referenced in terms of politics and discovering the racism and classism within feminism. And so I got very theoretical for a while, got off on being right, winning arguments, that sort of thing. I recently described myself as a recovering asshole. Like that sugar high of being right.
100%.
Wrong.
I know that.
And I get tempted again every now and again, but I know that doesn't ultimately, don't get me wrong, I think that it can have its place sometimes, but ultimately that's not the path I want to walk. That's not who I want to be in the world. That's not how I know things on a larger scale get better. So that 8 years old was a turning point. Another turning point was in 2009 when I was taking John Kenyon and Ike Lassiter's nonviolent communication mediation training. And I was so excited about this, and I wanted immediately to start working with people. They're like trying to slow me down. And I didn't listen. And I took out an announcement on like a mailing list or two that I was on, said, hey, I really want to practice this. And the very first people who walked through my door were this very masculine man and this just haunting woman. And the man sat down. They both sat down. And the first thing he said was, I am a dominant male. And when she married me, she agreed to love, honor, and obey. I made sure obey was in there. There's no going back from that. And he said it like that. And here I was, this is my very first mediation ever. But I didn't listen. I didn't listen to my wise teachers. I just jumped right in. And I actually didn't do too badly, which makes me realize when two people come to the table, that's 84% of the work. And even someone who's stumbling and fumbling and has no idea what they're doing can make a difference just by being there and not saying something profoundly stupid.
Oh gosh, I hear your contribution, and just, yeah, the holding presence for two people's journey. If they've already got themselves to that table, then yeah, that's inspiring. And there's, I'm guessing, a whole journey between back then and the work that led you to opening your own practice, doing more of the NVC work. And then actually, how did the somatic and NVC worlds?
So let me go back. Yeah. Back in my early 20s, I was experiencing I called them anxiety and depression sandwiches because I would feel anxious and feel depressed and insomnia. And I found a practice called reevaluation counseling, which is built on the kind of cathartic model and also had a lot of really good anti-oppression stuff built in. And that's where I first met Mickey Kashtan. She and her sister Arnina and her late sister Inbal were also involved in co-counseling. And then somewhere along the way, it came out that the co-counseling leader was transgressing sexual boundaries and people were basically behaving as if RC co-counseling, reevaluation counseling were a cult, which by some definitions it would be. And they left co-counseling. I left co-counseling, but carrying with me that way, learning how to listen and accessing somatic expressions and physical contact, that all just made so much sense to me that it should be available to everyone who needed it. Mickey and Bal and Arnina all went over to NVC, and so did I. Another grassroots organization without the kind of power abuse. I think because there's a kind of built-in democracy to NVC where people's needs and feelings are valued. Whereas in co-counseling, if you said, it doesn't seem right to me, the leader would say, go counsel on it. It was not a democracy. It was not encouraging of discussion or dissent. And there were some serious power dynamics in there that got abused and didn't land well. But the ability to access and express stuff that I have been holding and to do so, well, somebody sometimes literally was holding me or I was holding them, and the reciprocity and the anti-oppression work stayed with me. So when I took the nonviolent communication mediation course in 2009, another thing that struck me is that this could be contagious, meaning let's say we have a classic fight of a husband, like Marshall Rosenberg has used this example of a husband and wife. Husband won't let the wife help with the finances. He says, I love her. She's great, but she's not good with money. The wife says, he doesn't trust me. He treats me like a child. Marshall's able to get underneath those stories into the feelings and needs. And the couple resolves the conflict that's been having them in its grip for 37 years. So my thought was, what if we have a library of videos of people resolving both everyday and intense topical conflicts? And that led to, what if we had conflict resolution folks available on demand? So that planted the seed. And I did, for a little while, start something called witness mediation, offering conflict resolution in front of a group or to be recorded. And I didn't do very much of that. One thing I did do was show up at the Butch Voices conference in 2010 sometime, where I facilitated a discussion that was largely between older butch or masculine butch identified women and young trans men. And some of those tensions were around the sense of betrayal that what the older butch women expressed. You don't need to do this. You don't need to become a man. We have been living like this for decades. And the younger trans men were, I'm not you. I'm living a different life. And maybe you're trans and you're not fully owning that. I don't know, but this is who I am. And I want to be accepted for who I am. And it was pretty intense. And I felt honored to be able to facilitate that discussion as a queer femme. Doesn't identify as butch or trans, but at one point in my life, I did identify as a gay man. So, but that wasn't really part of the discussion. This idea of the library videos, my former co-founder, I wound up going separate ways. He's doing an AI only app for couples, and I'm doing this human forward app called Mendful, which will still include a library of videos. And the way that would work is, let's say, for example, a gay man has just come out to his conservative religious father, and the conversations just aren't going well. The young man, let's call him Brian, engages the app and invites his dad, let's call him Fred, to have a facilitated discussion with him on Mendful. Fred says, I don't want to do this woke thing, and resists. However, we'll surface a relevant video to Fred, the dad, of a similar father and son. And so Fred can anonymously get a vicarious sense of being heard and understood with respect to his his feelings about what's going on, with his gay son, alignment with his religion or his political beliefs. And he might also have a softening towards his son and understanding what it's like to be him. So part of my vision for Mendful is that we'll have these videos that, in addition to demonstrating to people what's possible if they engage Mendful, they also can get some benefit from this vicarious sense. At least that's a hypothesis. Vicarious sense of resolution from witnessing people like them being heard and understood in the face of people that they perceive to be unlike them.
I'm so moved and inspired the getting back connected to the potential for Mendful to be such a contribution in places where there's conflict and difference. I just feel the contribution of that and the way that we can bring tech to share that at scale. I'm guessing that's part of how your worlds came together. You could see the tech capacity to bring these sorts of stories and these sorts of resolutions as a healing technology. Would you say
Yeah.
something about that?
Yeah. Another turning point where all that sort of came together was I was at eBay, and our boss, Kevin Lee, had a day, I think he called it like Innovation Day or something, where we went offsite to basically a bigger room on another part of the eBay campus, and we could just innovate on whatever we wanted. And so I developed a high level prototype for buyer seller conflict resolution. And if you've ever bought or sold on eBay and had any kind of conflict, you know that the system is still kind of clunky, asynchronous, doesn't really engage people's humanity. It just says, oh, this is this kind of thing and you need to do this. It's like legal and legal adjacent mediation operates today, transactional devices. Yeah. Okay, and what's interesting to bring it full circle is that Kevin put me in touch with somebody who was at eBay at the time, Colin Rule, who now has an online dispute resolution company. And I recently talked with him just a few months ago, and I said, hey, I want to let you what I've been up to in the intervening 15 years. And he was delighted. I was delighted to talk with him again. And so I've been thinking about this intersection of technology and conflict resolution for a while. Ultimately, I would like to see Mendful be able to interface with e-commerce sites like eBay, maybe have offerings on telehealth platforms, work tools, and so on.
How do you describe it? You say human forward, AI supported.
Yeah. Everyone and their brother and sister and non-binary sibling right now is developing an AI thing. And we want to keep the human in it. Have AI available, but allow people to bypass that, especially since we've now got several dozen, I think maybe 52, last I checked, survey responses, and people are saying they trust humans way more than they trust AI. And I don't know, because of the demographics of who's responding, I don't know how significant that will be in terms of our target market, but I know we definitely want to have the humans be forward in this process.
I have this sense of therapists, people in the space who want to keep the quality of connection as primary. But I'm curious because I've seen some NVC apps out there. What's your sense of the space and what's being developed? I guess I'm trying to name the joy I have about keeping the humanity and the community of connection at the forefront.
Yeah, what I want to say, what I mean by human forward is that if you come onto the Mendful app, you will be able to talk to a human. You do not have to engage with AI. There might be some AI at the beginning, like, where are you calling from? What time is it there? Are you under the influence of anything? Are you in any danger to yourself or anyone else? That kind of thing. But we want to get you to a human quickly, if that's what you want. And that's, I think, our secret sauce, our unfair advantage, or unique value proposition. As a therapist, you're probably going to have to call a bunch of different therapists, wait and see if they're available, wait for them to get back to you, talk about whether they take insurance, on and on. And then the therapist may or may not have the kind of conflict resolution skills that you would get if you came onto Mendful. And they may want you to keep coming back so they can put food on the table. So it's a whole different thing than therapy.
Yeah, I really hear that. And that sense of the support on demand. So let's say on demand conflict resolution. You didn't named that, but can you expand on it a little bit more?
Yeah, there will be people ready to facilitate your conflict any time of the day or night. And one way we're ensuring that is we're looking at doing trainings in different parts of the world. So if somebody in the United States has a conflict at 3 a.m, there's going to be someone maybe in your country or in Nigeria or in Indonesia who's wide awake, just waiting to take a session.
I love this. And so what I'm immediately lit up by is the global community supporting each other. I think for some people there is resistance to ask for support and for
Yes.
help. And that what I hear and what you're offering is a very frictionless way of starting that journey of inquiry and support.
Yeah, we were going to, and that's where the user experience comes in. I'm a self-identified user experience weenie. I am constantly finding candidates for the user experience hall of shame, which is not very NVC or very compassionate, but to jackal it, to say very well deserved in some cases. To me, it's a very kind of advocacy, populist oriented stance to want to create great user experiences because so many people in the quote unquote developed world are dependent upon digital products to access their money, to get food, to get services, and so on. And so I want those experiences to be spa-like, if not just super easy, including Mendful. And that also leaves a question, which I imagine you might have next, is even if you have a great onboarding experience, and we, by the way, we are building Mendful first, our minimum viable product, our MVP, is going to be with off-the-shelf tools. So it won't be as instant as when we actually build the app, but it will still be virtually on demand. But then the next question, of course, is how will people become accustomed to doing this? What will make them understand, trust, and ultimately reach for Mendful when something is going on? Because conflict is a deeply personal, deeply vulnerable thing. And a lot of people in marriages perhaps wish that their spouse would reach for repair of the relationship as readily as they reach for repair of their car or their computer, but they don't because it's confronting, it's personal, it's scary. So how do we normalize this? One thing I look at is somehow we went from thinking of money as this incredibly private, encrypted thing to telling the world that we paid Bob $12 for pizza on Venmo. That's an encouraging sign to me, not because I care about seeing other people's transactions, but because people are willing to make things that were formerly considered lockdown private, public, including outsourcing their ethical questions. The AITA threads on Reddit, AITA stands for Am I the Asshole? I lent my friend money and it's been 6 months. He said he'd pay me back in a week. And now I see he's on vacation in Tahiti. Am I the asshole? And so people pile on and they love it. And people duet these things on TikTok and it's all over the place. Everyone wants to know who is the asshole, which is a very static framing. There's a right and there's a wrong. There's a good and a bad. There's a hierarchy. And we want to show people what's possible with some of these videos in terms of actually having a conversation. Hey, when I lent you that money, it meant a lot to me. And now I have bills of my own. How is that to hear? And getting people involved in processes that are human, that are connected, that are alive, that are dynamic, instead of these digitally enabled polarization.
Oh gosh, I think you're speaking to the global conundrum that we have right now, and this sort of holding of the two realities that are possible with the inherited way we've been programmed to do conflict and the way that we've learned with nonviolent communication and embodied practices that there are ways to connect that can circumvent some of those tragic outcomes that are so reliable from the old good, bad paradigm. So yeah, I've got tingles with excitement about the sort of outcomes that I can see. And you've been training people with Mendful. Will you say a little bit more about how your trainings are going? I'm curious because I think some of the people listening in For Purpose and social change can see that conflict is one of the places where our greatest missions in life can come a cropper and get bottlenecked, and that we're not getting to live the true missions our teams are capable of.
Sure. The training has been surprising for me and delightful in lots of ways. They're about going to be about, I think we start out with 28. We're going to have about 16 finishing, and I think are now working to certify to work on the app, because the people in the training are just this luminous group of people who are so skilled in so many ways. There's people with advanced degrees in conflict resolution, people who are working as conflict resolution professionals. One guy has decades of experience in NVC. There's a Fulbright scholar who's doing conflict work. I was afraid that I would be boring them, talking down to them, not meaning to, of course. But really, we're doing this somatic work, and I didn't go into where that comes from, but basically, self in relation to self, capacity to hold, capacity to be with one's own feelings as they arise, and then self in relation to other, and then the Mendful conflict resolution skills from there, which is basically classic NVC mediation, translating into feelings and needs. And as Marshall says, pulling people by the ears to hear those feelings and needs through their knee-jerk reactionary stories and jackalling, and then repeat back and forth. That has been hard for folks to do. And especially so on the app, we want to get people on and off the app quickly, not at all by rushing, not in any way, shape, or form, but by getting to the heart of the matter quickly, which involves often interrupting and saying, hang on, I want to make sure I catch what it is you just said. Because I don't know, you probably see people will drop the gem and then run away like hell. Because you can always say, this thing, you said that you felt hurt when this happened. Oh, yeah. Well, wait a second. Let's hear a little bit more about that. The vulnerable part is scary. So we open up the space. The self in relation to self, I have had so many practitioners personally in my life, therapists and even NVC folks who, like, when I get to something tough in myself, seem to become anxious, and then seemingly to manage their own anxiety will start doing a modality of some kind or another, which takes me right out of my experience. And so we start with capacity building for what arises within us and cultivating that spaciousness so that when something arises within somebody else, we don't automatically get anxious and start doing stuff to them. We let them have their moment. We be with it. We help the other person to be with it if need be. So there's a direct correlation between that self in relation to self, capacity, and self in relation to other.
Well, you've described that so beautifully, and I so resonate with what you've shared. I'm hearing that you're in a room full of people and being together in the capacity building for that, and that's inspiring. So how would you just say some more about like how it is in the group, and they're getting close to graduating now? Is that where they're up to?
The official training is over. They are self-organizing practice groups to keep moving towards certification. One of the students volunteered to work with me for free, which I really needed. So that's awesome. I now have an executive assistant working out of Ecuador, and I'm soon going to have this other student helping out because I've been bottlenecked with administrative tasks. We are fundraising. We're looking for an aligned angel or VC investor for a pre-seed round. And we're enrolling for the July cohort, which will be 6 months instead of 3, which is much more realistic for this work.
That makes sense. I'm going to guess that you're putting that out through the NVC network and other networks to reach people that might be curious about becoming a certified Mendful resource.
I don't know how to get into NVC networks. I will occasionally post something on the NVC group on LinkedIn, and other folks have said that they're going to let people in NVC networks know. So I welcome that. Time zones, excuse me, have been an issue. This past cohort, we had not only folks throughout the US time zones, but there were a couple people in Brazil, one of whom is Scottish, I believe. There was someone in Canada, someone in India, someone in Nigeria, someone in Colombia, and someone in Cairo.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
I know.
So wonderful. Just the very thought that there's that much international companionship. I feel, lit up hearing all of that.
I do
Yeah.
too. I just thinking about it. When just enrolled someone from Libya, another person came from South or Central America, but people from all over the world are wanting this. And one of my passions is to provide right livelihood. For example, I've been talking with someone in Indonesia who works with folks in Nigeria. Apparently, there are a lot of people in Nigeria trained in conflict resolution, but they are not able to have a right livelihood because the people in the country can't afford conflict resolution. Let's send some American dollars over there. Those Americans at 11 p.m., 3 in the morning, when everybody else in their country needs to be asleep, maybe there's someone in Nigeria awake who can help them.
Oh, I love that. I really see the mutual need mattering in that straight away. Like that's the way of the world that I want to contribute to as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I am concerned about cultural relevance because I don't know what I don't know. I have my Western, white, Jewish, United States, all the attributes that I have. As much as I try to become aware of what I'm not aware of, I don't know what I don't know. And so I imagine that there will be issues in terms of creating cultural relevance within training programs in other countries. And speaking of cultural relevance, it's one thing that we want to provide with Mendful is a wide diversity of practitioners. Some people come onto the app and it'll be like an Uber driver, just give me the first person available. I don't care. I'm in conflict. I need help. Other people, it may not be as urgent. They may want to browse and find someone with the same religion or ethnicity or sexual orientation or whatever it is, language, so that they feel a sense of familiarity, a sense of trust. So that's part of what's driving wanting to have a diverse group of practitioners.
That makes so much sense. It really matters for people's sense of trust and care. And so, yeah, having that capacity to be flexible and have people find what is most going to resonate for them is about meeting needs fundamentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many delicious things that we've opened up as a beginning of a conversation. We've just sort of touched the surface of quite a few things. This time, maybe we can get together again and have a second conversation at some point.
Absolutely.
But I guess I would ask as maybe a reflecting closing question about how you see social change in the work that you're doing. How
I was
you would
thinking about that. No, finish your thought. I was just thinking about that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, so I just want to open the floor to you.
Yeah. So I've been involved in social justice and activism in one way or another for so many years, sometimes more explicitly, sometimes more implicitly. And right before this, I was doing, I was doing leadership work with white anti-racist activists. And the foundation for that, for a couple of years, I ran workshops called White on White, how to have conversations with the other white people. And these were very somatically oriented, and they were prompted by around when Dylan Roof shot this room full of Black churchgoers in 2015, when Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd in 2020. I would see my liberal, progressive, and radical white friends basically talk about what a monster this white person was, and a lot of dissociation. And I had this sort of come to Buddha, if you will, moment when I was looking at a picture of Dylan Roof, this young, disaffected white man who said he wanted to start a race war. And I looked into his eyes on this photo, like this mugshot of him, and I recognized that kind of checked out look. And it was how my autism spectrum son would look before he had yet another violent tantrum. And I thought, that could be my son. And then I thought, that is someone's son. And then I thought, we're all part of this collective white psyche. We all helped produce the Dylan Roofs and the Derek Chauvins and all of those other white racists that my white liberal and progressive and radical friends are trying to dissociate themselves from. We need to be doing the opposite. We need to be leaning in and saying, how did we create this? And what can we do to fix this? Because if it were my son, I tell you, I would be writing him every day in jail. I would be trying to talk to him. I'm trying to lean in and find out what happened that he feels this way. All of those tools that we use in nonviolent communication. that we use in somatic counseling and so on. And some people say, that isn't that abdicating? Isn't that abandoning the whole prospect of social justice? I said, no, it's taking more responsibility by leaning in. And so when I would have these white on white conversations, workshops, it was so hard. The white people that would show up had the willingness, but it was just so hard for them to do even a role play of talking to Uncle Bert over Thanksgiving dinner. I don't see color. It just brought up so much. And so we would do what I've been teaching for so many years, slow down that moment. What's happening in your body? What are you telling yourself? And let the feelings come up. Take your time and then lay down a new neural pathway. Tell me about that, Uncle Bert. Have that in our back pocket in case we forget everything. Which if you only have 1 2-hour workshop, you might forget. And so it's the same work, right? And so when I found out about Resmaa Menakem's somatic abolitionism work, Resmaa Menakem is the author of My Grandmother's Hands and The Quaking of America, as well as other not specifically race-related books like Monsters in Love. And his books are all about slowing down our responses, letting our nervous systems untangle and unwind, and metabolizing racialized words, actions at a pace where we can actually work through how they're living in our bodies. So even though Mendful is not blatantly taking action in the world against misogyny, against abuse, against racism, and so on, we are in fact providing the tools to work through how those phenomena manifest one conversation at a time.
Oh, I just want to let the power of that land. Just taking a deep breath, like there's such a genuine social change consciousness in the slowing down, the recognizing, the feeling, and the collective belonging, the way that we're trained and the way that we are retraining for being able to live together with understanding. Yeah. Oh, look, what a powerful place to finish our conversation. Thank you so much for this chat today. And I really look forward to spending time again soon.
Likewise. Thanks. I appreciate the questions and the chance to be heard and be witnessed in this.
Yeah, it really matters to me that you be seen and acknowledged. And also, I'm sure there's been hard times for this journey to get to here. And it's a question maybe we can ask next time, but I would really want to hold with care that it's a journey to be able to create something and to keep coming back to it when it's challenging and your own conflicts happen in the midst of creating something like this. Your humanity in the mix of this, I just want to really honor what it takes.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about what you're saying, so I appreciate that.
That's where we'll pause for today. Thank you for being with us. You can find Jill and the work of Mendful at mendful.world. If this served you, please share it with someone walking a similar path and follow Power With on Substack so that you're included in the next conversation. Thank you for being here and for the care that you bring to your corner of the world. Until next time, bye for now.